The Nevada desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast expanse of tan and copper that shimmered under the relentless afternoon sun. Heat waves rose from the cracked earth, distorting the air into liquid mirages that danced along the horizon. At the fallen Naval Air Station's remote training facility, the temperature had climbed past 104 degrees, but that wasn't what had 15 of America's best snipers sweating. Staff Sergeant Mike Chen lowered his Barrett M1 7A1 rifle, his jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. Another miss. The 15th in a row. He'd been shooting competitively since age 12, had 43 confirmed kills in 3 combat deployments, and held the SEAL Team 7 record for accuracy. None of that mattered now. The target, a reinforced steel silhouette positioned 3,280 yards away across a brutal desert canyon, might as well have been on the moon. Negative impact, the spotter's voice crackled through the radio, confirming what everyone already knew. Chen stood, his legs stiff from lying prone for 40 minutes, and walked off the firing line with his head down. The other 14 SEALs who'd already failed watched with grim expressions. They understood his frustration intimately. They'd each felt it within the last 3 hours. Master Chief Garrett Hale, a 28-year veteran with a face carved from leather and granite, stood beside the shooting platform with his arms crossed. His pale blue eyes, nearly colorless in the harsh sunlight, tracked Chen's defeated walk. Hale had seen a lot in his career: combat in 4 different countries, missions that would never be declassified, moments of victory and tragedy that had shaped him into one of the Navy's most respected instructors. But he'd rarely seen his elite shooters so completely shut out. "All right, that's it," Hale announced, his gravelly voice carrying across the range. "This qualification is suspended until we get better conditions. The wind variance across that canyon is too inconsistent. We're talking 8-mile-per-hour gusts at ground level, 12 at midpoint, then dropping to 6 near the target elevation. Add in the thermal layers, the mirage, and the fact that we're basically shooting across different climate zones, and this becomes a lottery, not a test of skill." The SEALs nodded, grateful for the reprieve but frustrated nonetheless. They didn't like failing at anything. In the air-conditioned observation booth overlooking the range, Commander Sarah Ghost Reeves had watched every single attempt with unwavering focus. She'd arrived at Fallen 3 days ago as part of a controversial Department of Defense initiative to integrate training across special operations branches. The idea was simple on paper: break down inter-service rivalries, share best practices, create more effective joint operations. In reality, it meant putting an Air Force officer in charge of evaluating Navy SEAL training protocols, a recipe for tension. Reeves was 34 years old, tall and lean with sharp features and dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun. Her uniform was crisp despite the heat, her bearing military perfect. But it was her eyes that people noticed, dark brown, almost black, with an intensity that missed nothing. Those eyes had been studying every variable on this range for 3 hours: wind patterns, mirage distortion, each shooter's technique, the target's minimal profile. She'd seen the problem immediately. It wasn't the conditions, it was the approach. "What's she even doing here?" Petty Officer First Class Rodriguez muttered to his teammate as they packed their gear. "No offense to the Air Force, but this is a SEAL qualification. We don't need a babysitter." "Joint Operations Initiative," his partner replied with a shrug. "Politics. Just smile and nod until she goes back to whatever desk she came from." They didn't know that Reeves had been anything but a desk officer. Her last assignment had been with the 24th Special Tactics Squadron, providing precision fire support for some of the most dangerous operations in the Middle East. Her file was so classified that even most generals didn't have access to it. The brass knew her capabilities, but the rank-and-file SEALs only saw an outsider invading their territory. Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, the SEAL Team 7 operations officer, stood beside Reeves in the booth. He'd been cordial but cool since her arrival, professional courtesy masking clear resentment. "Well, Commander," Morrison said, not quite managing to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. "I think we can all agree that shot is beyond current capabilities under these conditions. Master Chief Hale's right to postpone." Reeves didn't respond immediately. Her eyes remained fixed on the distant target, her mind calculating variables that the SEALs had missed or dismissed as negligible. The shot wasn't impossible. It was just extremely difficult, a distinction that mattered. Through the booth's large windows, she watched Hale address his team. The men were gathering their equipment, ready to call it a day. Some looked relieved, others frustrated, all of them ready to move on from this failure. That's when something shifted in Commander Reeves. She'd spent her entire career proving herself in male-dominated environments. Her father, a legendary Marine Corps scout sniper, had taught her that respect wasn't given. It was earned through demonstrated excellence. She'd learned to shoot on the windswept ranges of Montana, where her father had trained her to read conditions that seemed impossible. She'd refined those skills through years of specialized training that few people even knew existed. And she'd applied them in combat situations, where failure meant American soldiers died. This wasn't about ego. This wasn't about showing up the SEALs. This was about capability, about pushing past assumed limitations, about proving that the impossible was just the improbable waiting for the right person to attempt it. Commander Reeves made her decision. She turned from the window and walked toward the booth's exit. Lieutenant Commander Morrison called after her, "Commander, where are you going?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed through the door and stepped into the furnace heat of the Nevada afternoon. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she walked deliberately toward the firing line where Master Chief Hale was still addressing his team. The SEALs noticed her approach. Conversations died. 15 pairs of eyes tracked her movement with curiosity and skepticism. Who was this Air Force officer who'd been observing their failure? What could she possibly have to say about it? Hale turned as she approached, his weathered face neutral but his body language defensive. This was his range, his men, his call. Commander Reeves stopped 10 feet from the assembled group. The sun beat down mercilessly. The wind that had bedeviled 15 elite snipers whispered across the desert. Somewhere in the distance, a raven cried out. Then Commander Sarah Ghost Reeves asked the question that would change everything. Her voice rang out clear and strong across the range. "Anyone else?" The desert seemed to hold its breath. The silence that followed Commander Reeves's question stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. 15 battle-hardened SEALs stared at her with expressions ranging from confusion to disbelief to outright annoyance. The audacity of this Air Force officer, who'd been watching from her comfortable, air-conditioned booth while they'd sweated and failed, to waltz down here and ask if anyone else wanted to try was almost insulting. Master Chief Garrett Hale turned slowly, his movements deliberate. His pale eyes locked onto Reeves with an intensity that had made junior officers wilt. But she didn't flinch, didn't look away, didn't soften her stance. She simply stood there in the blistering heat, waiting for an answer. "I'm sorry, Commander," Hale said, his voice carrying the kind of restrained patience one might use with a child who didn't understand the situation. "Did you have a question about the suspension order?" "No, Master Chief," Reeves replied evenly. "I asked if anyone else wanted to try the shot." A few of the SEALs exchanged glances. Petty Officer Rodriguez let out a short, humorless laugh. Staff Sergeant Chen, still smarting from his own failure, crossed his arms and looked away. Hale's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Commander, with all due respect, 15 of the Navy's best snipers just attempted that shot under these conditions. These men have hundreds of confirmed kills between them, decades of combined experience, and training that represents millions of taxpayer dollars. If they can't make the shot, I think we can safely say it's not happening today." "That wasn't my question, Master Chief." The tension ratcheted up another notch. Lieutenant Commander Morrison had emerged from the observation booth and was hurrying toward the group, clearly sensing that something was about to go sideways. Hale took a step closer to Reeves, his voice dropping lower but somehow becoming harder. "Then let me be clear, Commander. No, nobody else wants to try. The exercise is over. We'll reconvene when conditions improve." "I want to try." The words hung in the superheated air like a grenade with the pin pulled. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the SEALs erupted in barely suppressed reactions, scoffs, muttered comments, incredulous head shakes. "You've got to be kidding me," Rodriguez said, not quite under his breath. Master Chief Hale's weathered face flushed slightly, whether from heat or anger, Reeves couldn't tell. "Commander Reeves," he said slowly, "I don't think you understand what you're suggesting. That's a 3,280-yard shot across terrain with multiple wind layers, thermal distortion, and atmospheric variables that change by the second. It's 2 miles of pure chaos between the rifle and the target." "I understand perfectly, Master Chief." "Do you?" Hale's voice sharpened. "Because from where I'm standing it looks like you've been watching from an air-conditioned booth while my men put in the work. Now you want to come down here and what? Show us how it's done. Prove something." Reeves held his gaze. She'd expected this reaction, had prepared for it even. "I want to attempt the qualification, Master Chief, same as any of your men, unless there's a regulation that prevents me from trying." It was a chess move, and Hale knew it. There was no such regulation. The qualification was technically open to any qualified sniper, regardless of service branch. That was the whole point of the Joint Operations Initiative. But everyone knew this was a SEAL exercise, designed for SEALs, and the presence of an Air Force observer was supposed to be just that: observation. Lieutenant Commander Morrison arrived, slightly out of breath. "What's going on here?" "Commander Reeves wants to attempt the shot," Hale said flatly. Morrison's eyes widened. "Commander, I don't think that's—" "I'm qualified on the Barrett M107A1, Reeves interrupted. "I meet all the prerequisites for the exercise, and unless I'm mistaken, the whole purpose of this joint initiative is cross-service integration and cooperation, so I'm requesting the opportunity to attempt the qualification." Hale stared at her for a long moment. Behind him, Petty Officer Jake Martinez leaned toward Chen and whispered, "Reeves, Sarah Reeves, I know that name from somewhere." The Master Chief's mind was racing. He could refuse her, but that would create an inter-service incident and give ammunition to anyone who claimed the SEALs weren't cooperative with joint operations. On the other hand, letting her try, and watching her fail, as she inevitably would, might actually reinforce his point about the impossible conditions. Maybe it would even get this observer to appreciate just how difficult their job was. A thin smile crossed his weathered face. "All right, Commander, you want to try, be my guest, but I'm giving you the same conditions as my men. No special accommodations, no extra time, no do-overs." "I wouldn't expect any, Master Chief." "Good," Hale checked his watch. "Standard prep time is 30 minutes, you've got." 15, Reeves said calmly. "I only need 15. The smile vanished from Hale's face. Now she was just showing off. Several of the SEALs muttered their disapproval. Chen shook his head in disgust. 15 minutes, Hale repeated slowly. "You're giving yourself 15 minutes to prepare for a shot that 15 experienced snipers spent 40 minutes each preparing for and still missed." "Yes, Master Chief." Hale's expression hardened into something carved from stone. "Fine, 15 minutes, starting now." He keyed his radio. "Range control, we have one more shooter. Commander Sarah Reeves, Air Force. Prep time begins now, 14:37 hours." As the acknowledgement crackled back, Hale stepped aside, gesturing toward the shooting platform with exaggerated courtesy. "The range is yours, Commander. Try not to waste our time." Reeves nodded and walked toward the equipment area where the rifles and gear were staged. The SEALs parted to let her through, their expressions a mix of skepticism and anticipation. This was going to be entertaining, at least, watching this desk jockey officer embarrass herself. But Petty Officer Martinez couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he knew that name from somewhere important. He pulled out his phone and started searching discreetly. Meanwhile, Commander Reeves reached the equipment table and began her preparation with the kind of methodical precision that comes from thousands of hours of practice. She didn't hurry, didn't show any sign of pressure. She pulled out a handheld weather meter and began taking readings. Then she accessed the ballistic computer and started entering data. Lieutenant Commander Morrison approached Master Chief Hale. "Chief, are you sure about this? If she files a complaint that we set her up to fail." "She set herself up," Hale interrupted. "I gave her 30 minutes. She chose 15. Besides, Jim, we both know she's going to miss. Maybe this will teach her some humility about what these men do." Morrison nodded, but he looked uneasy. Across the range, Reeves worked with laser focus. Her fingers moved quickly across the ballistic calculator, entering variables: wind speed at multiple elevations, temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, altitude, even the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation at this latitude. Her mind processed the data with the kind of fluency that comes from doing something so many times it becomes instinctive. Memories flickered through her consciousness: her father's ranch in Montana, the bitter winter wind screaming across the mountains as he taught her to read the invisible. "The wind is like music, Sarah," he'd told her when she was just 16. "Most people only hear the notes. You need to hear the whole symphony." She'd learned to hear it. Every nuance, every variation, every subtle shift. Behind her, word had spread across the base. Personnel from other units began drifting toward the observation points. A female Air Force officer was going to attempt the impossible shot that had defeated 15 Navy SEALs. This they had to see. Martinez finally found what he was looking for on his phone. His eyes widened as he read. "Holy shit," he whispered. "What?" Chen asked. "Afghanistan, Operation Silent Guardian, 2023. Martinez's voice was hushed, almost reverent. "There was a rescue mission that went bad. 12 soldiers pinned down in a valley, Taliban moving in for the kill. Fire support couldn't reach them in time. They were dead, except someone made a shot from over 2 miles away. Eliminated the enemy commander and broke their assault. Mission report says the shot came from external air support, but nobody would say who the shooter was. It became a legend in certain circles." "So," Rodriguez said skeptically. "So I just found a reference buried in a classified after-action report I saw once. The shooter's call sign." Martinez looked up from his phone, his face pale despite the heat. "Ghost." Chen's eyes widened. "No way." "Commander Sarah Ghost Reeves. She's not a desk officer, she's a myth." They turned to look at Reeves, who was now studying the mirage through a spotting scope, her expression one of intense concentration. Hale's radio crackled. 13 minutes, Master Chief, 2 minutes remaining." The Master Chief called out, 2 minutes, Commander." Reeves didn't acknowledge. She made one final adjustment to her calculations, then set down the computer and walked deliberately toward the shooting platform. The desert held its breath. And across the range, cameras began recording what would become one of the most famous moments in Special Operations history. Commander Sarah Reeves approached the shooting platform with the calm of someone walking into their own living room. No hesitation, no wasted movement, just pure, distilled focus. The Barrett M107A1 rifle lay waiting, its long barrel gleaming in the harsh Nevada sun. It was a beast of a weapon, 30 pounds of precision-engineered lethality capable of hitting targets over 2 miles away. In the right hands. Master Chief Hale watched her every move, his arms still crossed, his expression unreadable. But inside, something was shifting. The way she moved, the way she'd prepared, this wasn't amateur hour. This was someone who'd done this before, many times before. Reeves knelt beside the rifle and began her final equipment check. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, examining every component. She checked the scope mounting, tested the bipod stability, inspected the ammunition. Each .50 caliber round was massive, nearly 6 inches long, capable of punching through concrete walls. She selected 5 rounds from the ammunition case, holding each one up to the light, examining them for any microscopic imperfections. "What's she doing?" Rodriguez whispered. "Checking for consistent weight and balance," Chen answered, his skepticism beginning to crack. "That's actually smart. At extreme range, even a slight variation in the round can throw off the shot by feet." Martinez moved closer to Hale. "Master Chief, I need to tell you something about Commander Reeves." "Not now, Martinez," Hale said curtly, his eyes never leaving Reeves. The observation deck had filled with at least 40 people now. Officers, enlisted personnel, even some civilian contractors had heard about the challenge and come to witness it. The betting pools had started immediately. Most money was on Reeves missing, not out of malice but simple statistics. 15 elite snipers had failed. Why would she succeed? But a few people, those who'd served in certain classified operations, were betting differently. They'd heard the stories, whispers about a ghost shooter who could do the impossible. Reeves loaded a single round into the chamber with a decisive click. Then she settled into position behind the rifle, her body forming a perfect shooting platform. Her left hand supported the stock, her right hand curled around the grip, her cheek pressed against the rest. She looked through the scope, and the world contracted to that narrow circle of magnified vision. Through the powerful optic, she could see the target, a steel silhouette roughly the size of a human torso. At 3,280 yards, it looked impossibly small, wavering in the heat mirage like a ghost itself. Between her position and that distant target lay a canyon of air, each layer moving at different speeds, different temperatures, creating an invisible maze that her bullet would have to navigate. Her mind slipped into what her father had called the cathedral, a state of heightened awareness where everything slowed down and sharpened. She could feel her heartbeat, steady and strong, could sense the wind on her skin, could hear the subtle changes in air pressure. Flashback, Montana, 15 years earlier. Snow fell in thick curtains across the mountain range. 19-year-old Sarah Reeves lay prone on a frozen ridge, her father beside her with a spotting scope. The temperature was 12 degrees below zero. Wind from the northwest gusting 15 to 20, her father, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Reeves, USMC, said calmly. "Target is 1,800 yards. What do you see?" Sarah studied the wind flags they'd placed at intervals down the valley. Each one told a different story. 3 different wind layers, Dad. Ground wind is stronger. Mid-level is swirling. There's a thermal from that rock face catching sun. Upper level is steadier but faster. Marcus smiled, his weathered face crinkling. Most shooters would just average it out. That's why most shooters miss. You have to account for each layer, understand how your bullet will travel through each zone. The bullet doesn't care about averages. It only cares about what's real. Sarah made her adjustments and took the shot. The crack of the rifle echoed across the frozen valley. 2 seconds later, the distant steel target rang like a bell. "That's my girl," Marcus said quietly. "You're going to be better than I ever was." Present day, Nevada range. The memory faded, but the lessons remained. Reeves began her calculations aloud, partly for her own focus, partly to teach anyone who was actually listening. "Wind at ground level 8 miles per hour from 270 degrees, she said, her voice steady and clear. At midpoint, approximately 1,600 yards, wind increases to 12 miles per hour, shifting to 285 degrees due to canyon funneling. At target elevation, wind decreases to 6 miles per hour, shifting back to 275 degrees. Hale's eyes narrowed. That was exactly what his meteorological data showed, data that she shouldn't have had access to in just 15 minutes. But she'd calculated it herself, reading the environment like a book written in invisible ink. Temperature 94 degrees at firing position, estimated 88 at target due to elevation difference, Reeves continued. Humidity 38%, barometric pressure 30.12 and falling slowly. Altitude differential, target is 47 feet lower than firing position. Martinez leaned toward Chen. She's not guessing, she knows. But how? Chen whispered back. We had meteorological teams taking those readings. She was in the booth the whole time. Maybe she's just that good at reading conditions, Martinez replied, remembering the Afghanistan report he'd found. Reeves made a minute adjustment to her scope's elevation dial. Click, click, click. Each click represented a quarter minute of angle. At this distance, each click moved the point of impact by about 8 inches. Coriolis effect at this latitude, this direction of fire, adds approximately 4 inches of drift to the right, she said. Compensating. Hale felt his skepticism crumbling. The Coriolis effect, the influence of Earth's rotation on the bullet's flight, was something many snipers forgot to account for at extreme ranges. She wasn't just going through the motions. She understood the physics at a level that matched or exceeded his best shooters. Lieutenant Commander Morrison stepped closer to Hale. Chief, she actually knows what she's doing. I can see that, Hale muttered. On the observation deck, a senior Air Force colonel who'd been watching with interest pulled out his phone and made a call. General, you need to see this. Reeves is about to attempt the shot. Yes, sir, that Reeves. I think she's going to make it, sir. Back on the firing line, Reeves completed her final calculations. Estimated time of flight, 6.8 seconds. Bullet drop, approximately 1,420 inches. Total adjustments factored for wind, Coriolis, spin drift, and atmospheric conditions. She paused, taking 3 deep, controlled breaths. Her heart rate slowed from 60 beats per minute to 55. This was a technique she'd learned from Olympic shooters, combined with methods used by cardiac surgeons. Ultimate control, ultimate calm. 1 minute, Commander, Hale announced, checking his watch. Her 15-minute preparation window was almost up. Reeves didn't acknowledge. She was already gone, deep in the cathedral where only she and the target existed. Her finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack. The Barrett's trigger was heavy, about 6 pounds of pressure required, but she knew this weapon intimately. Had fired thousands of rounds through similar rifles, knew exactly where the break point was. Through the scope, she watched the target waver in the mirage, watched the wind flags at various distances, felt the gentle breeze on the back of her neck, calculated, recalculated, waited for the perfect moment when all the variables aligned. Behind her, 40 people held their breath. Martinez's phone buzzed with a text from a buddy in Air Force Special Operations. Is that really Ghost? If so, don't blink. You'll miss history. The wind at mid-range shifted slightly. Reeves saw it through the scope. The flags changed angle by perhaps 5 degrees. She compensated instinctively, a micro-adjustment to her hold. Staff Sergeant Chen, despite himself, was impressed. She's reading the mirage, he whispered to Rodriguez. Look at her. She's not just aiming at the target. She's watching the air between here and there. So what? Rodriguez replied, but his voice lacked conviction. So that's what separates good shooters from great ones, Chen said. The ability to see what's invisible. Master Chief Hale glanced at his watch. Time, he called out, but his voice was softer now, less challenging, almost respectful. Commander Reeves didn't move, didn't break her position. Her breathing had slowed to the point where she seemed almost statue-like. Only her eyes moved, tracking minute changes in the environment through her scope. The desert wind whispered across the range, carrying dust and secrets. And in that moment, Sarah Reeves became one with her weapon, with the target, with the 3,280 yards of impossible space between them. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. When everything aligns, when you've done everything right, trust yourself. The shot is already made. You just have to let it happen. Her finger began its final, smooth press on the trigger. The entire base seemed to lean forward, and the world held its breath. The trigger broke like glass. The Barrett M107A1 roared, a thunderous explosion that echoed across the Nevada desert like the voice of an angry god. The massive rifle bucked against Commander Reeves's shoulder with brutal force, 30 pounds of weapon absorbing the recoil of a round that could punch through engine blocks. But Reeves rode it perfectly, her body absorbing the shock, her eye never leaving the scope. The .50 caliber projectile erupted from the barrel at 2,799 feet per second, spinning at 240,000 revolutions per minute as it clawed through the superheated air. Behind Reeves, the muzzle blast kicked up a cloud of dust that rolled across the firing line like a miniature sandstorm. The concussion wave hit the watching SEALs like a physical slap. "Shot away," the range safety officer called out automatically. And then began the longest 7 seconds in recent military history. The bullet tore through the first 100 yards of air, still climbing slightly from the barrel's upward cant. At this range, Reeves had aimed nearly 12 feet above the actual target. The bullet would arc like a rainbow, climbing before falling in its terminal phase. The scope's reticle placement accounted for massive drop over distance. 2 seconds in, the round reached its apex, now 1,640 yards from the firing position, halfway to the target. It had already slowed to 1,900 feet per second due to air resistance. The bullet entered the canyon's mid-level wind layer, where 12-mile-per-hour crosswinds tried to shove it off course. But Reeves had calculated for this, had held her aim 0.3 feet to the left to compensate. The wind pushed the bullet right, exactly as predicted, keeping it on track. On the observation deck, the Air Force colonel had his binoculars trained on the distant target. His hands were shaking slightly. He'd seen Reeves shoot before in classified operations that would never make any official record. He knew what she was capable of. But this was different. This was in front of witnesses. This was proof. 4 seconds. The bullet continued its ballistic arc, now descending toward the target. It had traveled over 2 miles, passing through 3 distinct temperature zones, each one trying to alter its path. The Coriolis effect, Earth's rotation, had pushed it 4 inches to the right. Spin drift from the rifling had added another 2 inches. Reeves had calculated for both. Master Chief Hale stood frozen, his jaw clenched, eyes locked on the distant target through his own spotting scope. He'd been doing this for 28 years, had made impossible shots in impossible places, had trained the best of the best. And in this moment, watching this Air Force commander's bullet slice through the air, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Awe. 6 seconds. The round was in its terminal phase now, dropping fast but still supersonic. The target silhouette filled Reeves's scope, or would have if she'd still been looking. But she wasn't. She'd already seen everything she needed to see in the moment after the trigger broke. The sight picture had been perfect. The conditions had aligned. The shot was true. Her father had taught her that too. Once the bullet's gone, it's gone. Second guessing won't change its path. Trust your work. Petty Officer Martinez had his phone out, recording. His hands were steadier than they should have been, but his heart was hammering. He'd read the classified reports, knew that Commander Reeves had saved his cousin's entire unit in that Afghanistan valley. But reading about impossible shots and watching one happen in real time were 2 entirely different experiences. Staff Sergeant Chen found himself silently rooting for her. He didn't even know when his attitude had shifted, but somewhere between her methodical preparation and her absolute confidence, his skepticism had transformed into hope. Come on, he thought, make it. 7 seconds. The bullet crossed the final 100 yards, now traveling at 1,400 feet per second, having lost nearly half its initial velocity to air resistance. It dropped below the speed of sound with a faint crack, entering subsonic flight. The target was right there, 50 yards, 25-10. Clang! The sound of hardened steel striking hardened steel rang across the canyon like a church bell. Sharp, clear, unmistakable. Impact, the spotter's voice exploded over the radio. Stand by for confirmation. Through his scope, Hale saw it. Center mass. The hit marker on the target showed the strike point, dead center of the silhouette's chest area. Not just a hit, a perfect hit, a kill shot. The spotter's voice came back, professional but unable to hide the shock. Confirmed hit, target center mass, marking as perfect score. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The desert wind whispered across the range, indifferent to what had just happened. Then the observation deck erupted. 40 people were shouting, some in disbelief, some in celebration, all in shock. Officers were slapping the railings. Enlisted personnel were calling out to friends who'd missed it. The civilian contractors were pulling out their phones, already knowing this would become legendary. On the firing line, the 15 SEALs who'd failed at this same shot stood in stunned silence. Rodriguez's mouth hung open. Chen let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Martinez was grinning like a maniac, still recording, already texting his cousin. "You were right about Ghost. Holy shit, you were right." Lieutenant Commander Morrison just stared, his carefully maintained professional composure completely shattered. Master Chief Garrett Hale slowly lowered his spotting scope. He'd been in combat. He'd seen extraordinary things. He'd witnessed acts of courage and skill that defied explanation. But this, watching someone do in one attempt what 15 of his best men couldn't do in 15 tries, this recalibrated his understanding of what was possible. Commander Sarah Reeves calmly engaged the Barrett's safety, cleared the weapon, and stood. Her movements were unhurried, almost casual. She brushed some dust off her uniform, then turned to face Master Chief Hale. Her expression was neutral, not smug, not triumphant, just calm, like she'd done exactly what she'd known she would do. The two of them locked eyes across 10 feet of Nevada desert. "Permission to verify the target, Master Chief," Reeves asked, her voice steady. Hale opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. For one of the few times in his career words failed him. Finally he managed, "Granted, Commander, I'll join you." As they walked toward the vehicle that would drive them down to the canyon floor to physically verify the hit, the crowd continued its celebration. But Petty Officer Martinez noticed something the others didn't. He saw the slight tremor in Reeves's hands as she walked, saw the way she took a deep breath, steadying herself. She'd been just as nervous as anyone. She just refused to show it. That, Martinez realized, was the real lesson. Not the shot itself, but the absolute refusal to let doubt show. The unwavering commitment to excellence even when facing impossible odds. The quiet confidence that comes from 10,000 hours of preparation meeting one perfect moment of execution. The vehicle bounced across the rough terrain toward the target. Hale sat in the passenger seat, Reeves in the back, neither speaking. The driver, a young petty officer, kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the Air Force commander who just made history. When they reached the target, Hale climbed out first. He approached the steel silhouette slowly, almost reverently. The impact point was obvious, a fresh crater in the steel, bright metal showing where the .50 caliber round had slammed home. He pulled out his measuring tape, extended it from the center of the silhouette to the impact point. 1.2 inches from dead center. At 3,280 yards, over 1.8 miles, she'd missed the exact center by barely more than an inch. Hale turned to look at Reeves, who'd remained by the vehicle, giving him space to verify. "Commander," he said, his voice carrying across the distance between them, "I owe you an apology." Reeves walked forward, stopping a respectful distance away. "No apology necessary, Master Chief." "Yes, it is," Hale insisted. "I underestimated you. I made assumptions based on bullshit that doesn't matter. You just did something I didn't think was possible under these conditions, and you made it look easy." "It wasn't easy," Reeves said quietly. "I've just had a lot of practice." Hale studied her for a long moment. Then he extended his hand. "I'd like to hear about that practice, Commander, and I'd like you to teach my men what you know, if you're willing." Reeves took his hand, her grip firm. "I'd be honored, Master Chief." As they shook hands in the shadow of the target that had defeated 15 of the Navy's finest, a new understanding was born. Not just between two warriors, but between two services, two philosophies, two approaches to the same deadly art. The sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the Nevada desert in shades of copper and gold. And somewhere in the Pentagon, a general smiled as he read the preliminary report from Fallen. The real mission could proceed. The ride back to the main facility was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet than before. Not the silence of skepticism or judgment, but the silence of people processing something that had fundamentally changed their perspective. Master Chief Hale sat in the front seat, his weathered hands resting on his knees, his mind replaying every second of that shot. When they arrived back at the firing line, the crowd had swelled to nearly 100 people. Word had spread across the entire base with the speed that only military gossip can achieve. An Air Force commander had just embarrassed 15 Navy SEALs with a single perfect shot. Depending on who was telling the story, the details were either accurate or wildly exaggerated. As Reeves stepped out of the vehicle, she was met with a wall of staring faces. Some were admirers, some were curious, and a few, mostly the SEALs whose pride was still wounded, were guardedly hostile. She understood all of it. Respect in the special operations community wasn't given freely. It was earned through demonstrated excellence, and even then, some people needed time to adjust their worldview. Staff Sergeant Chen approached first. He'd been the 15th and final shooter before Reeves, and his failure still stung. But he was also honest enough to recognize skill when he saw it. He stopped 3 feet away and extended his hand. "I don't even have words, ma'am," Chen said. "That was the most incredible shot I've ever witnessed." Reeves shook his hand firmly. "You were close, Staff Sergeant. Your windage calculation was nearly perfect. You just overcompensated for the mid-level thermal by about half a degree." Chen blinked in surprise. "You watched my attempt that closely?" "I watched all 15 attempts," Reeves replied. "Every single one of you brought something valuable to the table. You just needed to see it was possible." Petty Officer Martinez stepped forward next, his phone still in his hand, though he'd stopped recording. "Commander Reeves, I have to ask, Afghanistan 2023, Operation Silent Guardian. Was that you?" The crowd went silent. Even those who didn't know the specific operation recognized the weight in Martinez's voice. Reeves met his eyes steadily. "That operation is still classified, Petty Officer." "My cousin was there," Martinez pressed. 12 soldiers pinned down, enemy moving in for the kill. Someone made a shot that saved all of them, a shot they said couldn't be made. He told me the shooter's call sign was Ghost. The pieces clicked into place for the SEALs who were listening. Commander Sarah Ghost Reeves, the Afghanistan miracle shot, the legend who supposedly didn't exist. "Your cousin and his team made it home safe," Reeves said quietly. "That's what matters." "You saved his life," Martinez said, emotion thick in his voice. "You saved all of them." Rodriguez, who'd been one of the most skeptical, stepped forward slowly. "How many other operations?" "Enough," Reeves answered, "and most of them will stay classified for a very long time." Master Chief Hale had been watching this exchange with growing understanding. The pieces were falling into place for him too, the perfect shot, the absolute confidence, the methodical preparation. This wasn't luck or a one-time fluke. This was who she was, what she was. "Commander," Hale said, his voice cutting through the murmurs, "I'd like to request something." "Yes, Master Chief." "My men need to understand what just happened. Not just the shot, but the how and the why. Would you be willing to conduct an after-action review? Break down your process. It was an olive branch. More than that, it was an acknowledgement that she had something valuable to teach, that her presence here wasn't just political theater, but an opportunity for everyone to improve. Reeves nodded. I'd be happy to, Master Chief. Give me 2 hours to prepare. Take all the time you need, Hale said. Then, in front of the entire assembly, he did something that shocked everyone. He came to attention and rendered a proper salute. Reeves returned the salute crisply. It was a small gesture, but in the hierarchical world of the military, especially among special operations personnel, it meant everything. Master Chief Garrett Hale, a SEAL legend, was publicly showing respect to an Air Force officer he dismissed just hours before. The crowd began dispersing, conversations buzzing with excitement. But several of the SEALs lingered, clearly wanting to talk to Reeves but unsure how to approach her. Lieutenant Commander Morrison, who'd been conspicuously quiet, finally spoke up. Commander Reeves, I owe you an apology as well. I've been less than welcoming since you arrived. You were protecting your team, sir, Reeves said diplomatically. I understand that instinct. Still, I was wrong, Morrison admitted. Would you join us for dinner tonight? Informal, just the team. I think everyone would benefit from getting to know you better. I'd like that, Reeves agreed. As the group broke up, Hale gestured for Reeves to follow him. They walked away from the crowd, heading toward a small observation bunker that overlooked the range. Once inside, out of earshot of everyone else, Hale's professional demeanor cracked slightly. All right, Commander, he said, turning to face her. Off the record, how did you learn to shoot like that? Reeves smiled faintly. My father, Gunnery Sergeant Marcus Reeves, Marine Corps. He was a scout sniper instructor at Quantico for 15 years. I grew up on ranges. Started shooting competitively at 12, was beating adults by 14. That explains the fundamentals, Hale said. But that shot today, that was beyond fundamentals. That was something else entirely. Montana winters, Reeves said simply. My father believed that if you could shoot in Montana winter conditions, sub-zero temperatures, howling winds, constantly changing thermals from sun hitting snow, you could shoot anywhere. We'd go out in the worst weather imaginable and practice extreme-range shots. Sometimes we'd spend all day waiting for the perfect 5-second window when everything aligned. Hale leaned against the wall, processing this. Patience and preparation. And understanding that 90% of the shot happens before you ever touch the trigger, Reeves added. Reading conditions, calculating variables, knowing your equipment so intimately that it becomes an extension of yourself. The actual trigger press is just the culmination of all that work. Your father must be proud. Reeves's expression softened. He died 4 years ago, cancer, but yes, I think he would be proud. He always said I'd surpass him someday. I'm sorry for your loss, Hale said sincerely. Then, after a moment, that Afghanistan operation Martinez mentioned, can you tell me anything about it? Reeves considered carefully. What I can say is that sometimes the only way to save lives is to take one from a distance so great that the enemy never even knows you're there. That operation was a 2,847-yard shot in mountain terrain with winds gusting up to 25 miles per hour. I had one chance. I made it count. Hale shook his head in amazement. And today was 3,280 yards. You just keep pushing the envelope. That's the job, Master Chief. Every mission is different. Every shot is a new puzzle to solve. You can't rest on past successes. Each one demands everything you have. A knock on the bunker door interrupted them. Petty Officer Martinez stuck his head in. Master Chief, sorry to interrupt, but you have a secure call from Admiral Hendricks at SOCOM. Says it's urgent. Hale's expression sharpened. Tell him I'll be there in 2 minutes. He turned back to Reeves. Commander, this conversation isn't over. I want to hear everything you're willing to share. Your techniques, your training methods, all of it. If even half of what you know can be passed on to my men, it'll make them more effective operators. I'm here to help, Master Chief, whatever you need. They walked back to the main building together, their relationship fundamentally transformed in the space of a few hours. What had started as territorial skepticism had evolved into mutual respect between two warriors who recognized excellence when they saw it. What neither of them knew yet was that Admiral Hendrix's call wasn't just a congratulation. It was the trigger for why Commander Reeves had really been sent to Fallen in the first place. The qualification exercise wasn't just training. It was an audition. And she just passed with flying colors. In a secure conference room in Tampa, Florida, at Special Operations Command Headquarters, intelligence analysts were watching the footage from Nevada. The target wasn't hypothetical. He was real, he was dangerous, and he was currently operating in northern Syria, surrounded by security that made traditional approaches impossible. The only way to eliminate him was a shot that, until today, the military had considered impossible. Now they knew it wasn't. They had their shooter. 24 hours after Commander Reeves's legendary shot, she sat in a windowless conference room deep inside Fallen's Secure Operations Center. The walls were lined with lead and copper mesh to prevent electronic surveillance. The only light came from harsh fluorescent panels overhead and the glow of a large monitor at the front of the room. Master Chief Hale sat beside her, his expression grim. Lieutenant Commander Morrison occupied the seat to her left. At the head of the table was someone Reeves recognized immediately. Rear Admiral James Hendrix, commander of Naval Special Warfare Command, whose weathered face had seen more classified operations than most people could imagine. "Thank you for coming on short notice," Admiral Hendrix said, his voice carrying the weight of authority earned through decades of service. "What we're about to discuss is classified top secret, code word clearance level. Nothing discussed here leaves this room without my express authorization. Clear." "Clear, sir," they responded in unison. Hendrix nodded to an intelligence officer standing by the monitor. The screen flickered to life, showing the face of a middle-aged man with a dark beard and cold, calculating eyes. "Khalid Nazari," the intelligence officer began. "Age 47, Syrian national, former chemical engineering professor at Damascus University. Currently the most wanted bomb maker in the Middle East and the architect behind the deaths of over 400 coalition personnel and countless civilians." The screen changed to show gruesome aftermath photos of bombings across Iraq and Syria. Reeves's jaw tightened. She'd seen enough carnage in her career, but it never got easier. "Nazari specializes in what we call signature bombs, devices specifically designed to defeat our countermeasures," the intelligence officer continued. "He's responsible for the roadside IED that killed a Marine convoy near Ramadi last year, 12 dead, including a 4-star general. He designed the suicide vest that breached the Green Zone checkpoint in Baghdad, killing 23. And most recently, he built the device that destroyed an aid convoy in northern Syria, killing 42 civilians, including 17 children." The room was silent, except for the hum of the ventilation system. "For the past 3 years we've been hunting him," Admiral Hendrix took over. "Every time we get close, he disappears. He's smart, paranoid, and protected by a network of loyalists who die before betraying him. Traditional approaches, raids, close air support, drone strikes, are all off the table." "Why?" Hill asked. The screen changed again, showing aerial reconnaissance photos of a mountain compound in what appeared to be rugged, remote terrain. "This is Nazari's current location," the intelligence officer explained. "A fortified compound in the mountains of northern Syria near the Turkish border. He's surrounded by heavy security, at least 30 fighters, including former Syrian special forces. But that's not the biggest problem." The image zoomed in, showing buildings clustered around the main compound. He's embedded himself in a civilian village. Women, children, elderly. About 200 non-combatants living within 100 meters of his position. Any direct assault or airstrike would result in massive civilian casualties. The political and humanitarian fallout would be catastrophic. Reeves leaned forward, studying the terrain. She could already see where this was heading. However, Admiral Hendricks said, standing and moving to the screen, there's one approach that might work. Intelligence indicates Nazari appears in the compound's courtyard every morning between 600 and 6:30 hours. He's paranoid about electronic surveillance, so he conducts his planning meetings outdoors where he believes he can't be monitored or targeted. The Admiral pointed to a mountain ridge visible in the aerial photo. This ridge overlooks the valley. Distance from optimal firing position to the compound courtyard, 3,312 yards, roughly 2 miles. The implications crashed down on everyone in the room like a physical weight. "You want a sniper shot," Hale said slowly. "Not just any sniper shot, Master Chief," Hendricks replied. "We need the best long-range shooter in the entire U.S. military to make a shot under combat conditions that will eliminate a high-value target without harming a single civilian. A shot that, until yesterday, we weren't sure was even possible." All eyes turned to Commander Reeves. She felt her heart rate increase, but her expression remained calm. "Sir, the Nevada shot was under controlled conditions. Combat adds layers of complexity, stress, time pressure, potential enemy contact, equipment reliability in field conditions." "We're aware of the challenges, Commander," Hendricks said. "That's why yesterday's exercise wasn't just a qualification. It was an audition. We needed to know if anyone in our arsenal could make this shot before we committed to the operation." "And now you know," Reeves said quietly. "Yes, you're the only shooter who qualified, the only one who can do this." The room fell silent as the weight of the mission settled over them. Hale cleared his throat. "Admiral, with respect, Commander Reeves will need support. Extraction, security, logistics. This isn't a solo operation." "Agreed, Master Chief. Which is why I'm asking you to assemble a team. Your best people. You'll insert with Commander Reeves, establish a hide site on that ridge, provide security and support while she takes the shot, and extract together." Hale didn't hesitate. "I volunteer my team from yesterday's exercise, sir. They've already worked with Commander Reeves. They understand her capabilities, and after yesterday they'll follow her anywhere." Morrison nodded in agreement. "I'll include Petty Officer Martinez, Staff Sergeant Chen, and 3 others from SEAL Team 7, all combat veterans with mountain warfare experience." Admiral Hendricks looked satisfied. "Commander Reeves, this is a volunteer mission. I can't order you to accept. The risks are substantial. If you're compromised, extraction may not be possible. If the shot fails, Nazari will disappear and we may never get another chance at him. And if anything goes wrong with civilian casualties, the political consequences will be severe." Reeves thought of the photos she'd just seen, the destroyed convoy, the children who'd never go home, the Marines killed by Nazari's bombs. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "We don't take these shots for glory, Sarah. We take them because someone has to, and we have the skill to do it right." "I'm in, sir," she said firmly. 72 hours to wheels up, Hendricks announced. "The target maintains his routine for now, but our intelligence window is limited. If he suspects we're onto him, he'll vanish. You'll insert under cover of darkness, establish your position, wait for the shot opportunity, execute and extract. Mission duration, approximately 36 to 48 hours on the ground." The intelligence officer distributed mission folders, thick packets containing terrain analysis, weather forecasts, enemy force dispositions, extraction routes, and contingency plans. "Study these tonight," Hendricks ordered. "Tomorrow you begin mission-specific training. We're building a mock-up of the compound and surrounding terrain at our classified facility in Arizona. You'll rehearse until you can do this in your sleep." He stood, and everyone else rose with him. "This operation is codenamed Longshot," the Admiral said, "and it might be the most important mission any of you will ever undertake. Khalid Nazari has killed hundreds. If we succeed, we save potentially thousands from future attacks." Questions. "Rules of engagement, sir?" Hale asked. "Nazari only. Positive identification required. Absolute certainty. Zero civilian casualties. If there's any doubt, any possibility of collateral damage, you abort and wait for another opportunity." "Understood, sir." "Commander Reeves," Hendricks turned to her directly, "I've read your file, every classified operation, every impossible shot. You've never failed a mission. Don't start now." "I don't intend to, sir," Reeves replied. As they filed out of the conference room, Hale pulled Reeves aside in the hallway. "You good?" he asked quietly. Reeves took a deep breath. "Yesterday was about proving myself. Tomorrow is about saving lives. Yeah, I'm good. My men will have your back, I promise you that." "I know they will, Master Chief, and I'll do everything I can to bring all of us home." They walked down the corridor together, heading toward the team briefing room where the selected SEALs were waiting. The mission ahead would test every skill they possessed, push them to their absolute limits, and potentially change the course of the war against terrorism. But first, they had 72 hours to prepare for the most important shot of Commander Sarah Ghost, Reeves's career. And this time, there would be no second chances. The Black Hawk helicopter skimmed low over the Syrian mountains, its rotors beating the night air with a rhythmic thump-thump-thump that Commander Reeves felt in her chest. Through her night vision goggles, the rugged terrain below appeared in shades of green and black, a hostile, unforgiving landscape that had swallowed countless warriors throughout history. Beside her sat Master Chief Hale, his face painted with camouflage grease, his eyes alert despite the late hour. Across from them were Petty Officer Martinez, Staff Sergeant Chen, and 3 other SEALs, each man carrying 70 pounds of gear and the weight of a mission that could save thousands of lives or end in disaster. 2 minutes, the crew chief shouted over the rotor noise. Reeves checked her equipment one final time. Her custom Barrett M107A1 was secured in a protective case. Her spotter scope, range finder, ballistic computer, and backup systems were all triple-checked. She carried enough ammunition for 5 shots, though she prayed she'd only need 1. Her sidearm, a Sig Sauer P226, rode in a thigh holster. Survival gear, medical supplies, and 3 days of rations completed her loadout. The helicopter flared, hovering 3 feet above a rocky outcropping. "Go, go, go," the crew chief yelled. They jumped into the darkness, landing in a crouch as the Black Hawk immediately banked away, disappearing into the night sky. Within seconds, silence returned to the mountain, a silence so complete it felt oppressive. Hale hand-signaled the team into a defensive perimeter. They waited, listening, watching for any sign they'd been detected. 5 minutes passed. 10. Nothing but wind and the distant howl of a dog in the valley below. "Move out," Hale whispered. They climbed higher, using night vision and GPS to navigate the treacherous terrain. The insertion point had been chosen specifically, 2 kilometers from their actual hide site, to avoid drawing attention to their exact position. The climb was brutal, each step carefully placed to avoid dislodging rocks that might tumble down the mountain and alert enemy sentries. 3 hours later, they reached the ridge. Below them, barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness, lay Nazari's compound. Reeves pulled out her range finder, 3,312 yards. Perfect. They spent the next 2 hours building their hide site, a carefully camouflaged observation post that would be home for the next 36 hours or more. Using natural materials and desert camouflage netting, they created a position that was virtually invisible from any direction. 2 SEALs would maintain security while the others rotated between rest and observation. As the sun rose over the Syrian mountains, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and reds, Reeves settled behind her rifle and studied the compound through her scope. The first opportunity came at 6:17 hours. Khalid Nazari emerged from the main building, walking into the courtyard exactly as intelligence had predicted. Reeves's crosshairs found him immediately. Range, 3,312 yards. Wind, 6 miles per hour from the west. Temperature, 72 degrees and rising. Her finger moved to the trigger. Then 3 children ran into the courtyard, laughing and playing. They came within feet of Nazari, who smiled and patted one child's head. "Abort," Reeves whispered. "Civilians in kill zone." She lifted her finger from the trigger, her heart pounding. So close. But the mission parameters were clear. 0 civilian casualties. No exceptions. Nazari returned inside 15 minutes later. The first opportunity was gone. The day dragged on with agonizing slowness. The temperature climbed to 98 degrees inside their hide site, which felt like a furnace despite the shade. They rationed water carefully, knowing they might be here longer than expected. The SEALs rotated positions, maintaining constant vigilance while managing fatigue. During the long afternoon hours, as they waited for the next opportunity, the team began to bond in the way that only shared danger and boredom can create. "Commander," Hale said quietly during his shift beside her, both of them watching the compound through optics, "can I ask you something personal?" "Sure, Master Chief." "When you showed up at Fallen, I was a complete ass to you, and I've been thinking about why." He paused, struggling with the words. "I have a daughter, Katie. She's 22, just graduated from Annapolis, wants to be a SEAL." Reeves glanced at him, surprised. "The Navy's opened all combat roles to women now, but guys like me. We grew up in a different era. We were taught to protect women, not put them in harm's way. And when you showed up, part of me saw my daughter and I couldn't reconcile the idea of her, or you, in this kind of danger." "That's honest," Reeves said softly. "It's also wrong," Hale continued. "Katie's stronger than I give her credit for, and you're one of the most capable operators I've ever worked with, regardless of gender. I let my protective instincts turn into prejudice. I'm sorry for that." "Master Chief, being protective isn't wrong. But you're right, it becomes a problem when it stops people from recognizing capability. Your daughter will be an excellent SEAL if she has half your dedication." Hale smiled faintly. "She's got twice my stubbornness, that's for sure." Martinez, overhearing the conversation from his security position, spoke up. "My sister's a Marine helicopter pilot, flies Cobras in combat zones. When she first enlisted, my dad lost his mind. Thought women shouldn't be in combat. Then he watched her graduate flight school at the top of her class. Now he won't shut up about her accomplishments." "People can change," Chen added. "I used to think women couldn't handle the physical demands. Then I got my ass kicked in hand-to-hand combat training by a female instructor who was half my size. Humility is a powerful teacher." The conversation drifted to families, to the people they were fighting to protect, to the reasons they'd each chosen this dangerous profession. Reeves shared stories about her father, about growing up on those Montana ranges, about the moment she realized she could use her gift to save lives. As darkness fell on their first day, the team had transformed from a group of individuals into something more, a unit bound by trust and shared purpose. The second opportunity came at 6:23 the next morning. Nazari appeared again, this time alone in the courtyard. Reeves's pulse quickened. She checked conditions. Wind now at 8 miles per hour from the southwest, temperature 68 degrees, humidity rising. She calculated, adjusted, prepared. Then a dust storm rolled across the valley, sudden, violent, reducing visibility to near zero. The wind speeds became chaotic, gusting unpredictably. Conditions unsuitable, she announced. Abort. Nazari disappeared back inside, swallowed by the dust. 2 opportunities gone. The hours crawled by. The team's water was running low. Their extraction window was closing. If they didn't take the shot by tomorrow morning, they'd have to abort the entire mission. That night, as Reeves tried to sleep in shifts, she thought about all the people depending on this shot. The soldiers who wouldn't die from Nazari's bombs if she succeeded. The families who wouldn't be destroyed. The children who would grow up with their parents. The pressure was immense, but she'd trained for this her entire life. On the third morning, at 6:11 hours, Khalid Nazari emerged from his compound once more. This time, the conditions aligned perfectly. Clear sky, steady wind at 7 knots from 270 degrees, temperature 78 degrees, no civilians visible, no dust storms, no obstacles. "This is it," Hale whispered beside her, his eye pressed to the spotting scope. Reeves settled behind her rifle, her breathing slowing, her heartbeat steadying, every variable calculated, every adjustment made. Her father's voice echoed one final time, "Trust your training, trust yourself." Her finger found the trigger. The moment had arrived. And Commander Sarah Ghost, Reeves prepared to take the most important shot of her life. Part 8. Legacy. 1,000 words. Commander Sarah Reeves's world contracted to a single point of absolute focus. Through the scope, Khalid Nazari stood in the courtyard, 7,300 feet away across a valley that had defeated lesser shooters. But Reeves wasn't lesser. She was the culmination of a lifetime of preparation, meeting one perfect moment. Her breathing slowed to 4 breaths per minute. Her heartbeat steadied to 48 beats. The cathedral of silence descended over her, that sacred space where only she and the target existed. "Wind steady, 7 knots at 270, Hale whispered from the spotting scope. "No change in conditions. You are clear for the shot." Reeves made her final micro-adjustments. Her crosshairs settled on Nazari's center mass. Time seemed to slow. She could feel the mountain beneath her, solid and eternal, could sense her father's presence as if he were lying beside her one more time on those Montana ranges. "Send it," Hale breathed. The trigger broke. The Barrett roared, its thunderous report echoing across the Syrian mountains like the judgment of God. The massive rifle bucked against her shoulder, but Reeves rode it perfectly, keeping her eye in the scope to observe. The bullet carved through the morning air at 2,799 feet per second. 7 seconds, an eternity compressed into heartbeats. Through the scope, she watched Nazari's body jerk as if struck by an invisible hammer. He dropped instantly, dead before his brain could process what had happened. "Confirmed hit," Hale's voice was tight with emotion. "Target down, I repeat, target down." The compound erupted in chaos. Armed men poured from buildings, searching frantically for a threat they couldn't see, couldn't comprehend. How could their leader be dead? There had been no aircraft, no warning, no sound except the distant crack that came seconds after impact. "Pack it up," Hale ordered. "We're moving in 90 seconds." The team moved with practiced efficiency, breaking down the hide site, erasing any evidence of their presence. Within 2 minutes, they were climbing down the mountain's far side, putting distance between themselves and the chaos behind them. They moved through the day and into the night, navigating by GPS and night vision, pushing their bodies to the limit. 32 hours after the shot, exhausted and dehydrated but alive, they reached the extraction point. The Black Hawk appeared like a guardian angel, dropping from the darkness to carry them home. Inside the helicopter, as they lifted away from Syrian territory, Martinez grabbed Reeves's shoulder and shouted over the rotor noise. "That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen." Chen, his earlier skepticism completely erased, just shook his head in awe and gave her a thumbs up. Master Chief Hale sat beside her, and for the first time in 3 days allowed himself to smile. "You did it, Commander. You actually did it." Reeves nodded, too exhausted for words. But as the adrenaline faded, she thought of the children in that compound who would never know how close they'd come to being collateral damage. Thought of the future soldiers who wouldn't die from Nazari's bombs. Thought of her father and hoped he would have been proud. The mission was classified top secret. There would be no medals ceremony, no public recognition. Just a quiet notation in her service record that only a handful of people would ever read. But in the shadowy world of special operations, where word traveled through secure channels and whispered conversations, the legend of Ghost grew. 6 months later, Fallen Naval Air Station, Nevada. Commander Sarah Reeves stood in front of a classroom filled with 42 faces, 23 Navy SEALs, 14 Air Force Special Tactics operators, 3 Marine Corps Scout snipers, and 2 Army Rangers. The Advanced Long-Range Precision Fire Course was now a permanent joint service program, and she was its director. Master Chief Garrett Hale sat in the front row, no longer just an observer but her co-instructor and strongest advocate. He'd requested the assignment personally, telling his superiors that if the military was serious about preparing for future threats, they needed to learn from the best. Petty Officer Jake Martinez, recently promoted and awarded his instructor qualification, stood at the back of the room. He'd become Reeves's teaching assistant, helping bridge the gap between services with his natural diplomacy and infectious enthusiasm. "Today we're going to discuss the psychology of extreme-range shooting," Reeves began, her voice carrying confidence earned through proven excellence. "The technical skills are essential, but what separates good shooters from exceptional ones is mental preparation and the absolute refusal to accept that something is impossible just because it's difficult." A cocky young SEAL in the third row, fresh from basic underwater demolition SEAL training and full of himself, raised his hand. "Ma'am, with respect, how often do we actually need to make shots beyond 2,000 yards? Isn't this kind of training just theoretical?" The room went silent. The experienced operators knew this kid had just stepped in it. Martinez suppressed a smile. Reeves walked slowly toward the young SEAL, her expression neutral. "What's your name?" "Petty Officer Jackson, ma'am." Petty Officer Jackson, 6 months ago, a terrorist responsible for killing over 400 people, was eliminated by a single shot at 3,312 yards. That shot saved potentially thousands of lives from future attacks. Still theoretical. Jackson's face reddened. "No, ma'am, I apologize." "Don't apologize," Reeves said, her voice softening. "Question everything. That's how we improve. But understand that the limits we accept are often self-imposed. What seems impossible today becomes routine tomorrow if we're willing to do the work." She turned to address the entire class. 6 months ago, 15 excellent shooters told themselves that conditions made a certain shot impossible. They weren't wrong to be cautious, but they were wrong to give up without trying. Does anyone want to know what happened next? Master Chief Hale stood up, his weathered face breaking into a rare smile. "I'll tell them, Commander. We learned that the impossible just means nobody's done it yet." The class erupted in motivated responses. The barriers that had once divided these services, the tribal territorialism, the pride-driven competition, the refusal to learn from each other, had begun crumbling. Not completely, not everywhere, but here in this room, something fundamental had changed. After class, as students filed out discussing wind calculations and ballistic coefficients, a young Air Force operator approached Reeves nervously. "Ma'am, I'm one of only 3 women in this course. Some of the guys, they don't think I belong here." Reeves met her eyes directly. "Do you think you belong here?" "Yes, ma'am. I qualified with top scores." "Then prove it, not to them, to yourself. Earn their respect through excellence. That's the only currency that matters in this community. The young woman straightened. Yes, ma'am. As she walked away, Martinez approached with a tablet. Commander, you've got an email from Admiral Hendricks. Another mission request. They're asking specifically for you. Reeves glanced at the message, then at the range outside where her students were beginning practical exercises. Through the window, she could see SEALs and Air Force operators working together, sharing techniques, building the kind of cross-service excellence that would define the future of special operations. Tell the Admiral I'll review the mission brief tonight, she said. But right now, I've got a class to teach. Martinez grinned. Copy that, ma'am. Master Chief Hale joined them, watching the students through the window. You know what I see out there? He asked. What's that, Master Chief? The future. A better one than we had, because you showed us what's possible when we stop limiting ourselves with old thinking. Reeves smiled. We showed us, Master Chief. This is as much your legacy as mine. That evening, as the sun set over the Nevada desert painting the sky in brilliant colors, Reeves returned to the range where she'd made that legendary shot 6 months ago. She stood on the firing platform, remembering that moment. The pressure, the doubt she'd refused to show, the absolute commitment to excellence. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Your father would be so proud. I know I am. Reeves looked out across the canyon where that target still stood, now a permanent monument to what had happened here. They'd mounted a plaque beside it that read, "The impossible is just the improbable waiting for the right person to attempt it." Tomorrow, she'd review that mission brief from Admiral Hendricks. Tomorrow, she'd continue building the program that was changing military culture. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new targets, new opportunities to prove that capability mattered more than preconceptions. But tonight, standing on this range where 15 SEALs had failed and 1 Air Force commander had succeeded, Sarah Ghost, Reeves allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She'd broken more than records and hit more than targets. She'd shattered barriers, earned respect, changed minds, saved lives, and opened doors for every woman who would follow. Behind her, a group of students approached for evening practice. One of them called out, "Commander, we're ready when you are." Reeves turned, her scope sight picture already forming in her mind, crosshairs steady, breathing controlled, ready for whatever comes next. "All right," she said, walking toward them with purpose. "Who wants to take the first shot?" A dozen hands shot up. And in that moment, she knew, the legacy wasn't just about one impossible shot. It was about inspiring others to attempt their own. The end.